Hello and welcome to I Am Impact Podcast episode 16, Risk versus Risk. I'm Shane Malach.
And I'm Paul McCarthy.
And today we're going to talk about something that will happen to anyone, whether you plan it or not, is whenever you start a new business of any kind, a new business project, you want to sell a new product, you want to start a new website, whatever it is, one of the things that's inevitably going to happen is that you are going to kind of make a risk assessment, right? You're going to go, because even if you might have done market research and stuff like that, and you have kind of an idea in your head, this is the ideal outcome, we'll sell this, 5,000 people will buy it, we'll be rich, or something like that. And you know that there are 5,000 people out there who might want to buy this, but then the question is still, well, how likely am I to succeed at this? How likely am I to actually be able to pull this off? And what kind of risk is there? How high is the risk this is simply not going to work out? Now, Paul and I have talked about this or kind of alluded to this before, but we've never really explained that. And I think the way we look at this is a bit counterintuitive, because if I came to you, Paul, and I said, as a beginner, and I said, I have this idea, I want to create an independent income for myself, or I want to create a lifestyle business for myself or something. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a blog, right? Mm-hmm. I've read everywhere blogging is easy, so I'm going to start a blog. Is that a good idea or not?
Well, short version, no. As you
Long
can probably
version,
guess.
No.
Yeah, that's the end of our podcast. I mean, the thing is with blogging, for one, it's not really actually a business. It's actually just a marketing channel, but we won't get into that. But the other thing about blogging is if you look at the number of people that are actually making a living out of blogging and where they are in terms of the top percentages out of all the population who are trying to become bloggers, it's very small. The likes of Pat Flynn, for instance, how many people are making the kinds of income that he is compared to the number of people that are trying?
Yeah, and Pat Flynn is a great example, because as far as I know, Pat Flynn doesn't sell any of his own products or anything, does he?
No, I don't think he does. I think his main source of income, interestingly, actually he may have launched one thing, I can't remember, but I think his main source of income is actually affiliate links for hosting. Yeah,
and that's like a real. This guy's like a real blogger, and like a real professional blogger in terms of what he does is blogging, and he turns that into money somehow. And that is very, very rare. Now, to get to kind of the core concept I want to talk about here is the idea of a superstar business versus a business on a ramp. Okay, so superstar business versus business on a ramp. And this is the difference. This is why we usually say blogging is not a good idea. Like if that's your outset, if you're like, I'm going to make a blog and then I'm going to find out how to monetize it later, that's too risky. That's too risky, the way I see it. And but if you say, I have this idea, I'm going to try and sell a product, or I'm going to try and find a client for my service, that's a lot less risky. And that's kind of inverse, right? Most people, the story out there is usually, well, blogging is easy, you can do it for free, anyone can do it, it's a great opportunity. And but then creating a product or selling a service, that sounds complicated, right? But really, the difference is that blogging is a superstar business, and it's not the only superstar business, but it's a very typical superstar business. As an illustration of this, and there are many things like that out there, as an illustration of this, if I ask you who's the world's fastest sprinter, you probably instantly know that's Usain Bolt, right? Usain Bolt is a superstar because of how fast he can run. Now, if I asked you, who's the world's second fastest sprinter? A lot of people probably don't know the answer to that. If I ask you who's the third fastest sprinter, anyone who isn't like an enthusiast and follower of this sport is simply not going to know, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem is, and this is a typical kind of thing, right? As an athlete, if you're a superstar, that's great, right? If you're a superstar, you have a really good life and you get paid extremely well. It's good stuff, right? If you are not a superstar, even if you're quite close to the superstar's performance, you probably have a very hard life. You're training your ass off every single day, and you probably barely make enough to pay rent. Okay, and there are many examples where it's like that. Many examples of stardom. And for every actor you can find who makes millions for every movie they appear in, there are millions of wannabe actors who are working 2 part-time jobs, barely can scrape together a living. They might be good actors, but it's a superstar business. Unless you're in the top, it's not even the top percent. Unless you're in the top percent of the top percent, you're barely making a living. And that is what blogging is like.
But the interesting thing about it as well is that now it's even worse than it was before. I mean, 10 years ago, okay, blogging was kind of, you probably have 10 times more chance of making it 10 years ago if you started blogging, because the competition was way less. But now everyone is looking at creating a website. And I think there's 3 main problems to blogging as opposed to creating a normal, as you say, non-superstar business. I think the first one is what we've already said. The number of people that actually make it versus the number of people that try. The ratio there is way off. And so the chances are you're not going to succeed there. But also, the second thing is it takes you a long time before you actually start reaping any kind of reward whatsoever from your effort. I mean, there's literally... Seth Godin talks about the dip. The dip in blogging is if you started a blog 18 months ago and you're still not making money, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing it wrong.
Exactly.
It literally takes.
Yeah. In fact, I would be surprised if after 18 months you're already getting decent results on blogging. That's rare.
Let's actually, before I get into the third point, let's gain some perspective on this using real numbers. So I'mImpact.com. Yours is a pretty successful site. How long has it been going for now? It started off Rich Quick Review, didn't it?
Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
In 2010, so in winter of 2010. So
we're talking over 3 years then, basically. 3.5 years. And what if you were trying to monetize just your blog, how well do you think you'd be doing right now?
I'd be doing terribly. And that's also a point that I've made. Yes, I do get a decent amount of traffic, and it's not huge or anything. I do get a decent amount of traffic, and certainly it's a very profitable part of my business. But if you took my products out of the equation, first of all, I wouldn't be making any money, basically. I mean, if I just had some affiliate links to go by, I would probably not be making a full-time living off this. Before you even go into that, let's talk about some affiliate promotions you've done, and let's throw some numbers, real numbers out there. What's your most successful affiliate promotion you've done? Well, I think the most successful, it was cut short, but the most successful promotion that is very directly blog related was this very massive link building network roundup review I did. Where it really became like a go-to resource, and people went there and then decided from that post what link network to sign up from.
A savage amount of work went into that as well,
and a crazy amount, and also a lot of money went into that. It was an expensive post to create, and which is a whole other problem, because I could only make that post because I already had the kind of income that could finance that kind of post.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But this was definitely, like, in terms of directly from the blog into money, that was the most successful post I've ever done. It resulted, I can't tell you exact numbers, but it resulted in, let's say, roughly maybe $2,500 of recurring monthly income from that. But unfortunately, a few months later, the big Google slap came and they started de-indexing these blog networks, so that fell off a cliff pretty quickly.
Well, that's actually a very good result. I think
that's a very good result.
Higher than normal.
But again, this is, you have to see the result here. Why could I get this kind of result? Because if I send an email list to my list of customers, I get hundreds of people to a blog post, right? And that is, if I didn't have that, so again, it's very difficult to try and get around that, because if I didn't have that, if I didn't have those customers, if I didn't have the products that lended me the authority that makes those people open those emails, then that same post would have maybe made $100, $200, maybe in a very good situation, $500 a month, right?
Mm-hmm. And you're very good at building relationships as well with the people on your list. I think you're quite good at that. I don't know many other marketers who have that kind of such a responsive list.
But to and as you know, as I said, this was like an extremely positive. This was like an extremely good.
Yeah, that's definitely
promotion.
not the typical result.
And it's not the typical result. In fact, the typical result. This is another thing. That's very, very noticeable if you sell your own product. If I can make the most glowing promotion of someone else's product, and and maybe refer 100 or 200 sales, and I can make a very simple, here's my new product kind of email, and get 300 to 500 sales right away, right? So that's another thing where it's very, very clear that there's a big difference between promoting someone else's stuff and promoting your own stuff.
Yeah. And this is exactly the kind of experience I had as well. I mean, I had a few niche sites back in the day when niche sites were the thing. You and I were kind of balling a little bit during those days, weren't you? I mean, you had a number of sites that are doing well. I had a couple as well. One of my sites was about hair removal, and I spent an inordinate amount of time getting that thing ranked, and created a load of content, high quality stuff, and I think I was making about £10 a day in AdSense income off that one site, which came in about £300 a month, and it basically got slapped. And ever since then, I've been having about 5 visitors a day.
Yeah, and and we've mentioned this before, so I won't dwell on it. But the other thing is, the most extreme, mind-blowingly extreme difference. I also had niche sites, and I make good money from niche sites with affiliate promotions. But the dollar value per visitor on all my niche sites was,
Exactly.
in the end, a couple of cents per visitor. And in our product business, the dollar value per visitor is insanely high. We make so much money for every person who comes to one of our websites.
And it's crazy because we don't even use paid traffic yet. We need to slap ourselves for that.
Yeah, that's true. We probably should.
We really should. But so we got 2 points there. So one, the number of people that make it versus the number of people that don't, and secondly, how long it takes before you make your first income and the level that you can actually make. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add to that. One example that I remembered is Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Gary Vaynerchuk is an internet superstar.
Yeah, his wine business, yeah.
Yeah, but even him, I remember he had this wine show. He stopped and then started a new one and then I think stopped again. So I don't know if he has a wine show right now or not. But he had this wine show I think it was called Wine Library TV. That was huge. Okay, it was huge. But even he says, and I don't know the numbers anymore, but I remember seeing a video of him where he says, I was doing this for ages with basically no viewers before it started taking off.
Yeah.
Even him, and he's so charismatic and he's such a superstar, this guy.
Actually, another example I remember is if you actually go to SEO Moz, I don't know if they still got their blog, but you can actually go right through the archives. Now, SEO Moz, they're actually just Moz now, aren't they?
It's Moz now,
They've rebranded, which is kind of a sign of the times right there. But if you actually go through the archives, it's literally Randy Fishkin, or Rand Fishkin, I'm not sure his name. Basically writing into bliss. Like, nobody was paying any attention to him for years. He was just writing about SEO and nobody gave a crap.
Yeah.
And it kind of just, and he went into the whole big time as well, didn't he, with his blog?
Yeah.
But he's got some balls, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think that's also a really important thing to realize. Even the superstars out there, even many of the people with huge authority blogs, they were plugging away at this for years with barely an audience before they took off. And with Gary Vaynerchuk, right? He ended up with like a book deal and a TV show and God knows what else. But he was plugging away at this for years with barely anyone paying attention before kind of breakthrough happened.
Takes a special kind of person to make that happen. I mean, just your blog. How many posts? You've got 200 posts or something like that, maybe even more.
Well, if you count the Sunday updates and the non-public stuff, it's like 500.
Yeah, actually, we've got a count in the sidebar. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. So the last thing the point I wanted to make, we've hammered this home a lot before, but it's so much harder to get links, to get traffic from other people if you're marketing just your content rather than if you have a product. If you think about it from the partner's point of view, if they send traffic to you and it's just content, they're not really getting anything out of that.
Yeah.
They send affiliate traffic. They're going to make money essentially.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite important. And we've noticed this a massive amount, especially with Hybrid Connect with that first launch. We had no idea it was going to generate that kind of traffic. Hybrid Connect now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's probably had more visits than I'm Impact this year.
Yeah.
And we started that site, what, last year?
Yeah.
And it ranks for everything.
Yeah, exactly.
It's building as well. So it just really does help your cause if you have something to sell.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what we mean when we say it's a superstar business model, right? When you have to reach the level of superstar in your niche, in your market, before you can even hope to make some money. And as we said, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a blog, but a blog should be an addition to your business. A blog should be an addition to what you do, and not the only thing you do. So that's the superstar business. The other type of business is a business on a ramp. And a business on a ramp is, for example, I have an idea for a service that I might be able to offer, and I just go, okay. We go the minimum viable product way. I say, I'm just going to slap together a super simple little website where I present the idea for this offer, and I'm going to basically cold approach people, right? I'm just going to call people or Skype people or in forums or whatever. Somehow at a conference, talk to people. I'm just going to go to people and say, look, here's the service I'm offering. And I'm basically going to pretend as if this already exists and I already know what I'm doing, even if it's the first potential client I'm talking to. Go, look, here's the service I'm offering. Would you be interested in this? And the thing is, the reason this is on a ramp is because what I'm doing is not, blogging and trying to get traffic and whatnot. What I'm doing is I'm trying to get a client. And the first client I get gets me paid, right? The very first client I get gets me paid. The second client doubles my income and so on, right? So that's a business on a ramp. And it's that kind of business. This is the thing, right? If you have let's say in your niche, you have the 100th most successful blog in your niche. That basically means nobody knows about your blog, right? That basically means that blog is deserted. If you have in a market the 100th most successful business in that market, you're probably a millionaire. That's the difference between a superstar business and a business on a ramp. And that's one of the reasons why I recommend starting a business on a ramp where you can get paid right away, because you can get paid earlier. The other reason is that it puts you in the trenches and it makes for much, much faster learning, okay? Because when you're like in the trenches, getting customers, getting that customer feedback and so on, you learn much more quickly than if you're just blogging away. And if we ask ourselves, what's even the point of having a blog, right? What's the goal with a blog? What are the goals? Well, the goals are like, you want to get traffic, obviously. So you want to find ways to get traffic to your blog and also use your blog to get traffic, right? And that's one of the things that takes ages before that really happens. You want to get in touch with the people in this market so you can learn what they want and need and so on. So you can provide the right kind of content and provide recommend or provide the right kind of products and so on to end up making money. And what else? And you want to get customers, or those are like the main points, right? Those are the main points of having a blog. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think the real power in having a blog, and we've kind of mentioned this already, is not a blog in itself, but as part of like a circle that feeds and grows. You get customers in the door, and then you keep them on a mailing list, and you send them to your latest posts, which then gains social media traction, which then increases your rankings, which gets more prospects through the door onto your list, and then the circle just keeps going around, and that's how it should be used, in my opinion, to just blog without having something to say and without having that complete picture is I'd say that's a pretty difficult thing to achieve.
Exactly, yeah. And it's also like there's also a factor. I think there's a psychological factor where if you're like, okay, I'm gonna create this product and sell it, it puts you on the spot. You really have to make something happen.
Yeah.
And if you're just like, well, I'm gonna blog for a little bit, that's very non-committal. And I think that's ends up being quite an important factor. It might seem like, well, that's trivial, but I think it ends up being really
It's so important in my opinion. I
yeah.
mean that kind of motivation after you spend hours. I mean, let's say you're working a job, you do 8 hours a day, you come home, you've got a family, you dedicate an hour each evening to writing a blog post, and at the end of the year you've got nothing to show for it. In fact, you're probably in debt because you've had hosting company bills, you've had other kind of bills you've needed to pay, and other bits of software that you need to pay for. That must be so demoralizing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you know, and don't get me wrong, I admire people who build a blog to the point where they make money just off the blog, like Pat Flynn did. That's an amazing feat. Yeah. And you know, these people are hardworking people.
Even one of our friends, Oni.
Yeah.
The guy from Nigeria. This guy is something else. He's a Terminator.
Yeah.
He just keeps on going.
Hardworking kid, man.
But even him, he's selling his writing services. He's not making money off his blog. I mean, he grew that blog for years. And he's only like, what is he, 18 or something? The guy's a Terminator.
Like 19 by now, right?
I hope so.
He must age.
But yeah, I mean, he's just incredible. But even him, he doesn't have a blog that's going to pay the bills without selling something.
Exactly. And then my final point is that if you actually look at how people monetize their blogs, if you actually look at how the big superstars monetize their blogs, it's usually that they sell a service or product of their own. That's what, you know, or a membership or something. It's usually that they end up creating a product of their own, and they use their blog as a marketing channel for that. And that's cool. You know, if you have that, if you have tons of fans, and then you can say, hey, I've created an ebook about whatever, and everybody wants to buy it because they already all love you. That's great. That's very cool if you have that, but it's not the easiest way to do it that way around. So taking into account that you're, you know, even if you do the blogging thing, you're going to end up selling your own product anyway, most likely. You might as well turn it around and start with the product. Now, we've talked about blogging versus product creation specifically as examples, but this applies to many other areas as well. And I think the important takeaway is the principle, where you have your business idea and you go, you know, is this a business on a ramp, or is this a superstar business? Because another example is when people have big ideas, right? If someone comes to me and says, you know, I have this idea for, let's say, a social network that will revolutionize the way people use the internet.
Yeah.
Okay. That's essentially a product, right? But it's a superstar product, because it will only work if you get bigger than Facebook, right? You basically have to get in there or get, you know, or that kind of, you have to have millions upon millions of people using that before it actually pays off. And that's a superstar business, because for every social network that makes it, there are hundreds, possibly thousands that don't.
And even then, those kind of projects are usually backed by lots of investments, and they have money to play with. Usually it's years before they even figure out how to monetize this kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just, if you look at the Silicon Valley projects like Twitter and Facebook, they weren't making any money for the first few years.
Exactly. So if you don't have hundreds of millions to play with, then
completely different rules.
Yeah. All right. So that is the idea of risk versus risk, and that is why we sometimes probably give kind of counterintuitive advice about, you know, what kind of projects we recommend you pursue and what kind of projects we don't. Because it's not necessarily about, you know, is this easy to get into, but how likely are you to succeed? And whatever you do, especially if you're a bootstrapper, especially if you're not starting a business with tons of funding or something like that, you want to be looking at a ramp. You want to be saying, okay, I can see a clear step to our first source of income right away, right? And I don't have to build I don't have to build my authority, build my readership, build my fans, build my reach, and then maybe make money. You want to be on a ramp where right away with the first step you can start earning. That's the takeaway. All right, anything else?
The only other note I had is, I've said this before, but I always see this on the Warrior Forum, so I want to hammer it home, is the advice of somebody who's quit their job to go and build a niche site. That's basically the common advice. I quit my job, I've got 6 months earnings left in my bank account, what should I do? And the response is always, just go and build a niche site. That is not a flipping business model at all. That is just building a niche site. That's building a blog, building a blog is a marketing strategy as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
What else is there? How do you make your money? Where do you get your readers from? Where do you get your customers from? That's if you quit your job and you need to make money, you offer a service or you get a product out there like tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually, we touched on that, but we didn't finish that thought, which is, we said that if you're blogging for 18 months, you can't really expect that anything has happened yet, and you have to keep going. If you want to build a product and you don't have anything out on the market yet for 18 months, you screwed up big time, right? If you're going to create a product, you're going to have something to show for it before 1.5 years are up.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of on a different scale there.
Yeah, there's a book, Start Small, Stay Small by Rob Walling. And he says basically you shouldn't spend more than, I think it was 150 hours or so on your first product to get that out there, to get that first iteration in the marketplace. I've been so guilty of violating this rule. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
The number of hours I've spent on products that I haven't even released yet is just stupid.
Yeah, I know.
And they failed, essentially. So my hourly rate was something, right, here's an interesting story and then we'll leave it. My first site one of my first sites was a hotel booking site. So whereas most people maybe create a little site here and try and monetize it with AdSense, I did this crazy, stupid site, spent hundreds of hours on this thing, integrated with all the booking agencies I could find, live searching on hotel rooms, millions of articles. The net result is about 6 or 7 years later, I think I just made 100 quid. I think I've just about got enough to have 2 nights away
in a hotel.
They won't even give me my money because I haven't even earned enough.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I might have 2 nights at a hotel in exchange for about 600 hours of my life.
Yeah.
The hourly rate on that is not great.
It's not great. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I have stuff like that as well where, and that's the reason. Paul and I are both like super, like we so insist on keeping things small and getting to the first client quickly and so on, because we've both suffered so hard from making these mistakes. So that's where it comes from.
I could literally talk for about another hour about stuff like this. My film site as well, the same thing. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. Let's leave it on that.
All right. Okay, so that's it. Risk versus risk for this week's episode of the I Am Impact podcast. Now, here's something I want to do. Here's something I want you to do. Even though it's super annoying, go to iTunes, and if you're watching this on I Am Impact, you can see the link to our iTunes thing down below, and go and leave us a rating and maybe a comment. That would really help us out, right? So I don't know, are we allowed to bribe people for ratings? Probably not. So instead, I'm just going to say...
That's never stopped us before.
That's never stopped us before. If you leave a comment, you get $50. No, you don't know. But it would be really cool if you could, because I guess that's important in the iTunes marketplace, if you could leave a rating and maybe a quick comment on how you like the show. Even though, I hate iTunes as well. It's super annoying. But if you do that for us, that would be very, very cool. All right, so that's all for today's episode. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.
So.